of how God works in our lives. So this morning, and I'd like to welcome everyone. This morning we're going to be talking about, so we've gone through our laws of health. There's only 3 that we haven't looked at, although you got a little sneak preview of the mind last night. And tomorrow I'm going to give 2 lectures on the mind, and you'll see some common denominators, but I'm going to explore in more detail this dialogue between the different parts of our mind tomorrow morning. But we're going to the little Baptist church down the road because I think there are some more people coming. We couldn't fit 700 into that little hall, so we didn't. So the invitation went out to just a few friends, I think. But this morning we're going to be looking at 2 subjects, which is water and exercise. But as we look at water, we will also be looking at salt. But the first one we're going to have a look at is exercise. God designed that this living machinery be in daily activity, and in that activity is its preserving power. Whenever I see a statement that I love, then I begin the long process of memorizing it. And so that statement I just gave you, that sentence, is something I memorized because I thought it said it so well, that God designed this living machinery to be in daily activity, and that in that activity is its preserving power. What's a preserving power? A preservative is something that stops you going bad or off. Is that right? Now, whether we lie down all day long or move, the heart keeps pumping and the blood keeps going through the body. But the number 1 killer in the world today is heart disease or stroke, and it has a lot to do with this heart. The heart, as Proverbs 4:23 says, we need to keep the heart with all diligence, because out of it are the issues of life. Now you can have 2 different meanings on that verse, because often the Bible talks about the heart as it talks about the mind. So you could say, keep the mind with all diligence, because out of it are the issues of life, meaning, and as the proverb says, life and death are in the power of the tongue. Whoso loveth it shall eat the fruit thereof. In fact, if you love bad speaking, you'll eat the fruit of that. And if you love kind words, tender words, you'll eat the fruit of that. So that is one meaning. But the other meaning I'm specifically looking at this morning, keep the heart, yes, the actual heart, with all diligence, because out of it are the issues of life. And Leviticus 17:11 says the life of the flesh is in the blood. And we've looked at the blood a few times this week. We've looked at the fact that the blood is the life of the flesh because it's the carrier. And it carries to the central business district. The central business district is the inside workings of the cell. And what the blood does is it carries the nutrients into the cell. And the main nutrient used by every cell is glucose. And it goes into the cell under the action of insulin. It goes through the 20-step pathway that gives us 2 units of energy. The end result of the 20-step pathway is the chemical form of glucose called pyruvate. And pyruvate, as the chemical form of glucose, gets fed into the next section, the 8-step pathway. And even though it's only an 8-step pathway, it's called the powerhouse of the cell because of its ability to give us 36 units of energy. What a difference oxygen makes. And that's what makes the difference between these 2 pathways, is this 8-step pathway uses oxygen. The 20-step pathway, no oxygen. The glucose that we don't burn through the energy pathways gets stored as glycogen. And glycogen is a name given to quick-release glucose stores. So when the blood delivers to the cell, it's delivering the glucose, it's delivering the oxygen, it also delivers the water. And so keeping the heart with all diligence is vital to the proper delivery of nutrients to the cell. I'm going to show you how exercise keeps the heart with all diligence. So there's three things we're looking at in keeping the heart with all diligence. One is the heart, and nothing strengthens the heart like exercise. Exercise is the number one thing that strengthens the heart. In fact, when you look at some athletes, some peak athletes, their heart rate can be 45 beats per minute, 46, 50 beats per minute. Whereas a person who lies down and does nothing all day, their heart rate can be sometimes even 70 beats per minute. And that makes a huge difference. It is said we have only so many beats in a lifetime. Which heart's going to wear out first? The boom, 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 boom. And look at the rest. Boom, boom, rest, boom, boom, rest. Look at the boom, boom, rest. Boom, boom, rest. That slower heart rate. And the only way really to change that heart rate is exercise. The more you use that heart, the stronger it gets. Strength comes by exercise. There is no other way. One lady said, how can I improve my circulation other than exercise? I say, sorry. Yes, cayenne pepper's very good at moving blood, but it does not take the place of exercise. Before I go into detail as to what exercise does, we also will be drawing our fat cells. Now, you had a little preview of this the other night as I showed the effect of exercise for weight loss and also for diabetes. But I'm going to go a little bit further today. And it probably began about pre-war, in about the 1930s. There were exercise trainers in Germany who were putting their athletes through high-intensity interval training. And they found when it came time for the event, those athletes had an edge. And isn't that what it's all about? So in the Olympic Games, you have got the best, the peak, the top athletes from every single country. And yet you can only have one winner, can't you? Well, let me introduce you to a Bible verse that talks about those games. It talks about the Greek games, and it's found in 1 Corinthians 9. And the verse, I think, starts about 25. It says, know you not that they that run in a race run all, but one receives the prize? Therefore so run, that you might receive. Every man that strives for the mastery is temperate in all things. Now they do it to obtain a corruptible crown, we an incorruptible. I therefore so run, but not as uncertainly. So fight I, but not as one that beats the air. I bring under my body. I keep it in subjection, lest by any means, if I have preached to others, I myself might be a castaway. I trust you got all that. It's Old English, which I love the poeticness of it. It's referring to the Olympic Games. Only one receives the prize. So when he says they do it to obtain a corruptible crown, do you know what the prize was with the first Olympic Games? It was a wreath, and it was woven out of vine leaves, and I put it on their head. That was certainly corruptible. In fact, by the end of the day, the leaves are wilting, yeah? But it was the prestige of the games. In fact, the person that won, he was given great honours. In fact, the family he came from were honoured. The town he came from was honoured. But notice what this Bible verse says. They do it to obtain a corruptible crown. We an incorruptible. Now today it's not a wreath with vine leaves, is it? It's a lot of money, but guess what? That's corruptible, isn't that true? In fact, the proverb says that money has a tendency to get wings and fly away. I had a man come and attend our program. He said, I was a very, very wealthy man. He said I had apartments in Singapore. He said I had vine orchards in Tasmania. I owned one of the most expensive houses in the harbour in in Sydney. He said, I've lost everything. He said, I was retired, the man was early 60s, and a friend of mine asked me to go into this business venture with him for a bit of fun. Took him for everything. And I thought of that verse, money has wings to fly away. And so when the Bible says they do it to obtain a corruptible crown, so even though there's no longer vine leaves and there's money and that, that can have wings and fly away. They do it to obtain a corruptible crown, we an incorruptible. You see, the race of our life has a prize. And if we surrender to the great God of heaven and do His will and look after His body, then we're one day going to be in those heavenly courts which will never pass away. You can't earn the right to go to heaven. Jesus has already done that. All we have to do is accept that wonderful gift that He gives us. So what I wanted to mostly point out to you was where He says, I therefore so run, but not as uncertainly. They don't know if they're going to win or not. But guess what? In this race, every man can win. But look what He says, I keep under my body. I bring it into subjection. So when it wants to lie in the morning, you say, no, you're not staying here, you're getting up. Sometimes when you do your morning walk, you might have to do this. See, every man that strives for the mastery is temperate in all things. Temperate means, temperance is a combination of moderation, and there are some things that you do not do. Therefore, I bring under my body. And that's what we talked about briefly last night, and I will explore in more detail tomorrow morning, the relationship between what I should do and what my emotions want to do. That's why I keep under my body. No, you're not staying in bed. No, you're not. You're going to have the salad. No, you're not going to eat. It's not a mealtime. It's time to drink water. No, you're not going to be dehydrated all day and then drink large amounts with your meal. No, see, there's a little bit of that. I bring under my body. I keep it into subjection. Especially this one's for me. If by any means when I have preached to others, I might be a castaway. And I told you the story, I think, of that man who was a very fit preacher, and but he used to be obese. I told you that story. And that little old lady said, I wouldn't listen to a word you say because of the size of you. And, you know, some people on the church would have said, well, that little lady shouldn't have said that. But if you're going to stand there and if you're going to deliver, you got to take it. Would you ever get the painter to paint your house if paint's falling off his house? No. In fact, I read in one book, it said never go into the doctor's surgery if he's got a dead plant in his office. If you can't even keep his plant alive. And that's why the Bible says in James chapter 1, I think it's verse 22, be ye doers of the word and not hearers only. So let's have a look at this high-intensity interval training, which was first done in the 30s. But it was almost lost in the war. Much was lost in the war. And then it started to be talked about in about the 1980s, a Japanese trainer named Tabata. You might have heard of Tabata because in many gyms, I see a few nods, especially the gym people, they have a Tabata protocol. So what Tabata did was he'd heard this, and so he put his figure skating girls onto the high-intensity interval training. So what I want to show you is what he did. And as the name implies, these are intervals of high intensity. And Christina was telling us this morning she was so excited when she saw this property because there was a hill. And that is a high intensity hill. You don't have to run. And I met Jen at the top this morning and she was breathing heavily, and I said, "You've just done the hill, haven't you?" Because that's how I was breathing this morning. So what Tapata did with his high intensity, he got his girls to be skating very, very, very fast, but he only would do it for 30 seconds. And then he'd get them to do a recovery time. Now, that's not right. Now, I'm not a skater, but I've seen my grandchildren that live in Wisconsin, they all skate. And those boys, whoa, don't they love going fast? And they do a bit of ice hockey. You've got to be good for that. And whoa, are they moving fast? So that's what he got them to do. He got them to do high intensity for 30 seconds and then a 90-second recovery. And that 90-second recovery, they have discovered, is best if you're actually doing something. Most of the research has been done on exercise bikes. And on the exercise bike, you can move very, very fast, and then it can be just slowly doing it. If you're doing it on the rebounder, your recovery time might be this. That's the health bounce. If your calves are screaming at you, you might get off the rebounder and just do some upper body. And then that's done for a cycle. Cycle of 6. And my daughter, she contacted me, she said, "Mum, I've just been listening to a podcast by Dr. Doug McGuff. Now, he's mentioned in my book. A lot of the books that I'm mentioning to you, you'll find them in my book at the end of chapters. And he was looking at a form of exercise to help his heart patients, to strengthen the heart. And he discovered the high-intensity interval training. So what he did was he started with himself. So he'd do the 30 seconds high intensity, and because he was already fairly fit, he could do the 90-second recovery time. Your fitness is not determined by how hard and fast you can go, but how long you take to recover. How do you know when it's time to go again? Your body will tell you. You're breathing normally again. So I noticed that Jen's breathing normally again. So, if she was doing it, it'd be time to go up the hill again. But the good news is she's relaxing here in the lecture room. And done for a cycle of 6. Now, if your recovery time is 5 minutes at the moment, so be it. And Dr. Al Sears, here's another doctor who looked at the high-intensity interval training. And his book is PACE, Progressive Acceleration Cardiopulmonary Exertion. I'll explain those in a minute. And he also found that this gives an edge. And Dr. Al Sears, he quotes a lady who did 7 seconds high intensity and needed 15 minutes to recover. I tell you that one because not many people are quite that unfit. So if you can do 10 seconds and you have to rest for 10 minutes, that's all right, because you'll find the next day it'll change. In fact, the lady that did 7 seconds high intensity and had to rest for 15 minutes, I'd like to suggest that the next day she did 10 seconds high intensity and she only had to rest for 10 minutes. And it's quite possible if she does that every day, by the end of the week, she might even be getting up to 20 seconds high intensity and only needing 3 minutes to recover. Rome wasn't built in a day. Got that? We as humans have to remember not to be absolute. It's not all or nothing. It's just little by little. Let me give you one of Jacqueline's story. When I was in Phuket in May, Jacqueline was there and we're eating breakfast, but she didn't eat any nuts. I said, "You don't eat any nuts?" She said, "No, I'm allergic." So I immediately put my detective hat on. And she told me that a couple of years ago, was it a couple of years ago? Yeah, she was working in a health food shop and she didn't stop for lunch and she didn't have time to eat and there was nothing to eat, so she ate nuts all day long. Maybe a kilo? Yeah, about a kilo of nuts all day long. And then she discovered after that if she had a nut, she'd get a reaction. So she stopped eating nuts. So here we are 2 years later, and I looked at her and I said, "Try one." Got that? 1. She didn't react. Next day, she tried 2. She didn't react. And now Jacqueline can eat 8 nuts at a time. Can you see that we have to be careful not to be absolute? No, you can't handle 8 nuts. We'll try 1. You react with 1, so you know what you do? You try half for 1. And little by little. So it's the same with exercise. You might look at this and think, no way can I do that. That's all right. Just do what you can. And then little by little, as you implement it and as your body gets fitter, as it gets stronger, you will be surprised what you can do. Note your recovery time, because that is the indicator of your fitness. So it was about 6 years ago, I looked at a documentary on the high intensity interval training, and they were actually exploring what is it, why is it so effective, because everyone was talking about it. And they used the journalist, who was a lady about late 30s, who was going to go through this. And so what they did was they measured her. They measured her waist, her chest, her hips, muscle and fat ratio, all that sort of stuff. And to look at her, she was slim, not quite as slim as me. I know I'm very little. But you'd look at her and think, oh, she's nice, she's pretty good. And what they did with her is they did a 30 seconds high intensity, and they did 4 minutes recovery, and they did this for a cycle of 3. So that's what they did in their tests. And they would have pictures of her on the exercise bike, looking like she's half dying. And then in Melbourne, there are these steps in this park. So one of her high intensity was running up these steps, and she's just about falling on the ground at the end of it. And she did this every day. And at the end of, I think it was 6 weeks, they found that she had put on muscle and she'd lost fat. So her weight was about the same, and she had lost 2 inches around her waist. Isn't that incredible? She said, my skirts are loose. So it was incredible, because she was the journalist. So she was reporting on the feeling, and she said, I'm sleeping better. She said, I'm going to the toilet better. She said, I find that I'm not getting as tired in the afternoon. She said, I'm finding that I can accomplish my work in a better time. She said, I'm finding that where I used to slip into a bit of depression if I wasn't getting my goals, I'm not doing that anymore. So spiritually, emotionally, mentally, physically, she was raving and testifying about the difference in her life just by implementing this. Now, whether you do this one or this one, it's much of a muchness, then it's only 15 minutes a day. That's it. It's the best insurance policy you can make. Did you hear that? And no one ever has had a heart attack doing the high intensity interval training. And people think pushing themselves that fast, that hard, will surely cause the heart to protest. Actually, the heart loves it. But there are reports of heart attacks on someone doing a 5K jog. And I'm going to go into the cell now and show you why that is so. So this 20-step pathway, it's very fast, whereas the 8-step pathway is slow. And when a person starts the high intensity, so let's define high intensity. Yes, walking up that hill and not slacking your pace at all, you'll get high intensity. I think we've all experienced that. You can get it on the rebounder. If you jog or leap really high, you'll get quite a workout. On the exercise bike, very fast. Swimming, very fast. Push-ups. So anything that gets the heart rate up and increases the respiration. So in many gyms, they have the Tabata protocol. So you know what the Tabata is now. It comes from this Japanese trainer. And so there'll be pull-ups, there'll be the rowing machine, there'll be weights. So it's a cycle. And you'll find that each one is high intensity, but is actually slightly different. So whatever it is, halfway through that high intensity, the 20-step pathway speeds up. The 8-step pathway speeds up. That's not a surprise. But there's a rate-setting enzyme in there that will always keep this one faster and this one slower. But what that does, that means that that fast pathway is producing more pyruvate than can be fed into the 8-step. And so what the body does is it stores it as lactic acid. And I'm sure we've all heard of lactic acid. But I think one of the reasons why this is such an effective form of exercise is what happens in recovery time. So in recovery time, that allows the liver to convert the lactic acid back to pyruvate and feeds it into the powerhouse. So two things are happening there. Number one, your lactic acid is being mopped up. Number two, you're burning just as much fuel in recovery time as when you're running for your life. That's why it's such a powerful form of exercise. Let's go to the African plains. No animal jogs. They either run for their life or they're still. Have you noticed the deer, the antelopes, they're drinking, and then a lion appears. They go from I'm going to tell you a very scary story. It's a true story. A guest told me this. He was in an armoured vehicle on the African plains looking at all the animals, and there's a sign inside, "Don't get out of the car." Yeah. And they stopped because there were 2 lions, 2 lionesses and some little cubs, and they all looked like they were asleep, and the little cubs are playing a bit. A Japanese tourist, I think you know what's coming, he quietly stepped out to get a better shot. The lion jumped up and just ate him. Before the drivers even knew what had happened. And it looked like they would need a few minutes to sort of get up and pounce, but they did not. So, moral of story is, don't get out of the car. Isn't that incredible? So on those African plains, they do interval training. You look at children in the playground. No child jogs. Have you ever seen a child going? They run for their life or they stop. And as a child, we did hopscotch. In hopscotch, you're going for when you're the hopper. And skipping. When you're the skipper, you're going for it. And then, so this interval training, when you have a look at children, when you have a look at many sports, soccer, run around, kick the ball, everyone's going back to their spot. Basketball, then everyone back to their spot. You will find in many sports, many children, African plains, it's the high intensity interval training. So they've now started to put this into training for the athletes because they have an edge. So let's move on, because that's one of the reasons they have an edge, because it mops up the lactic acid. Now, even if they're going to do a triathlon and do long distance, this is the way they train for it. This gives them that edge. So now we're getting into our second set of high intensity. And the glycogen stores, remember the quick release glucose stores? They're getting plucked. They're getting plucked. They're getting plucked. Quick release glucose stores already in your muscle cell. And it's like they're in a prison, meaning they can only be used by the muscle cell. I would like to suggest that by the end of the third set, our glycogen stores have run out. And so now the brain stimulates the pituitary gland to release the human growth hormone. And the human growth hormone is a naturally occurring hormone that is active while we are growing. When we finish growing, it goes into retirement, unless it's called upon. Because the high intensity, it causes a little shock on your body, but that shock causes the body to strengthen. What the human growth hormone does, it causes a release of hormone-sensitive lipase. We had a look at the different enzymes that break down fat. Underneath the tongue, you've got lingual lipase that breaks down the saturated fat. From the pancreas, we've got pancreatic lipase that breaks down the unsaturated fat. Well, what does this one break down? It breaks down our fat stores. My daughter has 7 children. She lives in Wisconsin. She's got a big basement and she's got a big pantry. And down in her basement, she's got big containers. She buys everything bulk. And up in her kitchen cupboards, she's got jar of lentil, jar of almonds, jars. Well, when they run out, she sends the children down to fill up the jars from the basement stores. And this is exactly what's happening. We've run out the kitchen cupboards are running out. And so now we're going to the basement stores, and that is the fat cells. So the hormone-sensitive lipase breaks down the fat stores. The human growth hormone stops burning glucose as fuel and becomes a fat burner. We touched on this yesterday when we had a look at the fats, that glucose burns at 4 calories per gram, whereas fat, it burns at 9 calories per gram. And when you're doing the high intensity interval training, your body's moving. In fact, the message to your body is, whoa, we've got to adapt and adjust to this high movement. So we need a high energy fuel. And what's that? That's fat. You see, people don't understand what a calorie is. A calorie is a unit of energy. And if you want a high energy fuel, what do you eat? Fat. They used to do carb loading with athletes, but they don't do that anymore. Because the carb loading, yes, gave an initial rise, but then a corresponding dump. They now realise that they're far better to have high fibre, generous proteins and some great fats. That's why if the athlete's got an event at 9 o'clock, it's a good idea for him to have a smoothie at 8 o'clock and put in chia seeds, ground flax seeds, some protein powder, coconut cream, coconut oil. Yes, some blueberries. Yes, maybe some banana. Do it in the coconut water. Can you see that's high fibre with all your seeds and nuts and your fruits. Generous proteins in your nuts and your seeds and your protein powder. And great fats. Fats in all the nuts, in all the seeds, in the coconut creams. The saturated fat is a great fuel burner. And that will give that delivery, that consistent, sure delivery for that event. The human growth hormone also increases the body's ability to utilise protein. We've looked at the importance of eating sufficient protein. Weren't those lentils yum this morning? Mm-hmm. Eating sufficient protein. We've looked at the importance of not drinking with your meals. Are you getting better at it? The importance of drinking between the meals. So because we're eating later than I usually eat about 7, I have easily 4 glasses before breakfast. So I am not interested in drinking often for at least 2, nearly 3 hours after the meal. So if you're thirsty with the meal, it's a clear indication you're dehydrated. And in my next lecture, I'm going to show you how you can ensure full hydration. So we looked at the importance of eating sufficient protein. If you're thirsty with a meal, by all means have a mouthful. It's not going to make a big difference. We've looked at eating sufficient, not drinking with the meal. Well, here's another aspect, and that is doing a high-intensity interval training. So let me give you a story. We had a girl work for us for about 3 months from Canada. And just at the time that she came to work for us, we'd notice in the house, she'd be going, oh, it's so cold. Remember in Australia, we really don't have heating. We just light the fire. And we'd say, well, put something on your feet. She'd be walking barefoot. And we'd say, put some slippers on. But I understand, in Canada, the houses are all warm. So she can walk barefoot in her house with a T-shirt and a skirt on while it's snowing outside. So I understand that. She didn't grow up like you do in Australia. If it's cold, you put a woolly jumper on and you put your sheepskin boots on, yeah? But I tell you this to explain what happened next. We got a new fire. It's about 3 times the size of this fire here. And I said to the staff, this is a very efficient fire. So in the evening, pile it up with wood and close the vent so the fire will just murmur all night. So when Howard comes in the morning to wake the guests and get their lemon water, all he has to do is open the vent, and then he can wake up the guests, get their water. So the next day when I came in, she said, the fire's no good, in her French way. It's no good. I said, oh, why? And I looked in there and there was this big log with a couple of tiny little burn marks in it. I said, you bank it down? Yes. Did you have a bed of hot coals when you put that log on? Yes. Okay, so we got the log out and I said, show me how you did it. So she put a few little sticks in, a fire lighter, and it just started to get some flames. She got the log and went, boom. She said, see, it's no good. I said, I'll show you how to get a bed of hot coals. She said. So I put the little sticks in, then I put some bigger sticks in, then I put some bigger sticks, then I crisscrossed it and got some, and if I had some really good wood, maybe I could get some hot coals in 20 minutes. If you had some really good wood and you watched it carefully. And once I had about, 3 inches of good hot coals, then I put the big log in, but I didn't bank it down yet. I waited for that log to start alight, then I banked it down. I said, that's a bed of hot coals. And she went, But many people do to their body what she did. They wake up in the morning, few steps to the breakfast table, and they put the logs in. It's as simple as this. If you want to eat, you got to work for it. So when you get up in the morning, you have your water. I always, before I do anything, I surrender my life to God. And then you go outside and you do the high-intensity interval training. You've actually laid a bed of hot coals at the cellular level, and you can sit down and eat the fruit and the nuts and the waffles and the lentils because you got a bed of hot coals at the cellular level. Can you see that? The last one is the human growth hormone increases the circulation of the blood to the skin. That slows down aging. And my sister-in-law, Abigail O'Neill, you can Google Abigail O'Neill, she's a very famous model. She's a very good illustration that genetics lays the gun but lifestyle pulls the trigger. Yes, Her mother's Spanish. She's got beautiful olive skin, full lips. There's a bit of genetics there. There's no doubt about that. But she would not look like she does. They think she's 17 and she's 38. She's 48 actually now. She would not look like that if she didn't live the way you've been learning this week. Her husband built her some steps at the back of their property and she runs up and down there every morning. He also built her a little steam sauna that she jumps in. She looks incredible. Incredible. We saw her in London because she was flying to London and then to Paris. So this another little O'Neill from the bush has become a top model. And she doesn't take the human growth hormone. She lives this life. When you do that human high intensity in the morning, causing a release of that human growth hormone, that human growth hormone remains active for 24 hours. So yes, I'm offering it to your cut price. The movie stars pay $1,000 a week for this. Only 15 minutes high intensity interval training a day will cause a release of that human growth hormone. It's one of the secrets of longevity, one of the secrets of a better life. Remember what Jesus said in John 10:10, easy to remember? He said, I have come that they might have life, and that they might have life more abundantly. That is what God wants us to experience. It is not in his design that we be miserable and sick. No, no, no. No, no, no. And there are people that are making fortunes out of the sickness of people. Some medical, some not medical. A man came up to me last night. He said, do you sell those tablets on Facebook that your arteries will be clear in a week? I said, no, it's not me. $300 a bottle. Jeez. Someone's making a fortune out of all of that. And that's not God's way. God's way is that little by little we do it ourselves. And that explains why the high intensity interval training is such a powerful form of exercise. We had a young couple attend our program. She was 89. Got that? Actually, she was 86, he was 89. And they swim for 2 kilometres on Coffs Harbour Beach every single morning. Rain, hail, shine, winter, summer. I said, no wonder you look so good. And she said, you should see us on the dance floor. Yes, you're allowed to have wrinkles as you get older, but the skin on their cheeks was smooth. They were with us for 2 weeks. By the end of the first week, they made a decision to stop their statin drugs, their blood thinners, their blood pressures. And then they really came alive. And why were they taking all of that medication? Because of fear. Yeah? But remember what God said, I've not given you the spirit of fear, but of power, love, and a sound mind. Now the reason, and we see the reports in the newspaper, I've read several books that have got these reports, of a young man, 45 years of age, seems quite fit, he's on a morning jog and he keels over, has a heart attack and dies. And the couch potato says, see, I told you exercise was no good. But I want to know why. Why? What was happening with this man? And then we have a look. We look at that his wife uses a lot of chemicals in the home. And he uses a lot of chemical aftershave. Jacqueline was telling me she sat on the plane one day next to a man who was just covered in this aftershave that gave her a headache. See, these are more chemicals coming into our bodies. And when he's exercising, he's got the top exercise clothes all made out of polyester. And when he wakes up in the morning, he doesn't have water, he has Gatorade or some mixture that's got, it's got sugars and it's got the salts in it that are the refined salts. Let's look at his day before his heart attack. He woke up in the morning, he did his jog, he does it every day. on his Gatorade, came back. Oh, he's a bit short for time. He'll just have a cup of coffee and a quick slice of toast. He's a bit hungry mid-morning, so he has another cup of coffee, and the staff have got some nice little sugar biscuits, or you call them cookies there. Lunchtime, he has lunch with a few other businessmen, and they have some wine, and they have a big steak, and a few other delicacies. He's busy all afternoon, so by the time he gets home, he's really hungry again. Because lunch was at 12 o'clock. He was ready for it, because remember, he'd hardly had any breakfast. So by the time he gets home, he's hungry. And his wife said, it's almost ready, so he has a beer, and he has nibbles on some peanuts. And then he has the big steak, and potatoes, and maybe a little tiny head of broccoli. Has some red wine with the meal. After the meal, he likes a bowl of ice cream with chocolate flavouring all over it, and some liqueurs at the end of the meal. Now, from what you heard yesterday, are these sitting on the acid or the alkaline side? All on the acid line. Yep. He's on the computer and watches a movie a bit late, so he goes to bed a little bit late, doesn't get those hours before midnight where the hormones that are reviving and recharging is happening. He wakes up in the morning, and can you imagine the state of his body? It's in quite an acid condition. He doesn't have water. He has those energy drinks, the caffeines, the sugars, and he starts to jog. And he's getting a little tired, but he pushes on. So the lactic acid is building up in his cells because he's not having the recovery. His blood vessels are actually starting to contract because he doesn't realise the importance of nose breathing as well. And at one point where it has a narrow bit because of all the years of chemicals that came into his body, and right there in his carotid artery, there's a constriction, and he has a stroke, and he dies. And yet he's slim. He appears very, very fit. But can you see all the little hidden things in the background? But no one has ever died from a heart attack from doing the high intensity interval training. Because every time you have a recovery, your lactic acid is being mopped up. So these are some of the reasons why the high intensity interval training is such a powerful form of exercise. And we are training for something far more important than the Olympic Games. It's life. It's life. And this is why God says in 1 Corinthians chapter 3, verse 16 and 17, know you not that your body is the temple of the Holy Ghost, which is in you, which you... No, that's the next one. It says, know you not that ye are the temple of God, and the Spirit of God dwells in you. If any man defile the temple of God, him shall God destroy, for the temple of God is holy, which temple ye are. That brings it to another level. Now see, it says, if any man defile the temple of God, many people are today not even realizing that they are. That's why knowledge is power. And this man that had the heart attack and died, he did not realize. He actually thought he was pretty good. He looked good. He was slim. But he didn't realize what was happening in his artery. And his poor wife, she didn't realize that this laundry detergent that she was using, she didn't realize that this aftershaves he liked and she was buying for him, and she didn't realize the shirts he was wearing, she loves them, she didn't have to iron them. Many are sick through ignorance. And that's why once again we go to that verse in Revelation chapter 7, verse 9. It says that great dragon was cast out, that old serpent called the devil and Satan, which has deceived the whole world. Deception in the clothes we're wearing, deception in what we're washing our clothes in, deception in what we're eating. So many areas. That's why we all need to be private investigators, investigating what is in this. And so when I was in the most excruciating pain, and the ambulance arrived. They took one look at me, because I know as a nurse you can read body language. You can tell when someone's in very, very deep pain. And this guy, he got this green stick and he pulled it off and he said, breathe on this. I said, what is it? What is it? I need to know exactly, even in my pain, what is it? He explained and said, just, it'll bring you relief. And it did. And remember, I'm not doing this every day. Got it? I only had to do that for about an hour. And then they gave me some tablets. And yes, they were heavy painkillers, but guess what? It was one day. It was one day. So it's not the odd day you do it, or the odd day you don't. It's what you do every day. I could not do my high intensity for 6 weeks, because if I ran, it would ache. And I was amazed at how quickly I was able to get my fitness back. And it's because for the last, 15 years, I've been doing it. And it will hold you, even if there's a time of injury. So keep the heart with all diligence, because out of it are the issues of life. So this is not only the heart, but it is the blood, and it is also the blood vessels. And as I showed you the other day, it's the blood vessels that get that build up on it. No, the cholesterol's not the enemy. That's why when someone says, what can I do to replace my cholesterol lowering medication? I said, why do you need to replace it? There's nothing wrong with the cholesterol. We need to look at why it's there. It's there because of damage to the arterial wall. Most people, when they go home, that's where they go. They go to the kitchen, under the kitchen sink, they go to the laundry cupboard and they get their magnifying glass and start reading the labels. I'll go into a shop, whether it be a thrift store, whether it be the Scottish shop, and the first thing I do is I look at the labels. 100% wool. Polyester lining. It's all right, it's been cut out. And I've got my silk petticoat on. So it's beginning to investigate, and little by little changing these things. One lady said, I'm going to have to throw all my clothes out. I said, well, there's great shops called thrift stores. And little by little, when you get that good quality clothing, it lasts. I think I'll be wearing this till Jesus comes myself. I'll certainly do the Highland fling when I see him coming in the clouds. Everyone I know is managing something. And if you can manage it, you're doing very well. One day Jesus will come again and we'll all be cured. There is that wonderful promise. But until then, we manage. And if you can manage, you're doing very well. I had a couple of major injuries on my lower back, but I have no back pain. If I lift well, if I keep my core strong. And so how should we lift? The biggest bone in the body is the femur. The biggest muscle mass in the body are your quads. That's how you lift. So when I'm looking, I've got Jacqueline with me most of the time now. She's strong, her core's good. But my heavy bags, because I've got to have 4 different seasons in my bags. I've got to have a different outfit every night for 7 nights. So I've got heavy bags. So I have a look and I see a young man. You don't look for an overweight man. You don't look for a smart man in the suit. You look for the young man, the traveller, maybe about 40. And I say, excuse me, would you mind? Oh, and they get my bag. But if I don't see one, take a deep breath. I engage my core. I bend my knees. I'm going to lift here and in the core and got it. Because I've got to look after this back. I tell you, back pain is no fun. It's no fun at all. And so be careful how you're lifting. Have you seen the way a 2-year-old picks up a ball? You watch. They'll pick it up like this. That's how they lift it up. How do we lift up balls? When you bend like that, all the weight is here. But when you bend like that, your core is holding you and your quads. If your quads aren't strong, because when I go down like that, what gets me up? My quads. My quads. If your quads aren't strong, try this. Almost down, almost up, almost down, almost up, almost down, almost up, until they start screaming, then give them a break. But that's a very good way to strengthen your quad muscles. And that's how you can protect your lower back. So even though I've had some major injuries there, I have no pain. And it's not genetics. It's that I look after it, that I keep my core strong, that I keep exercise. I bring under my body. I keep it into subjection. If by any means when I preach to others, I myself might be a castaway. So let me compare to you 2 different systems in the body that are affected by exercise. One is the blood capillary system, and this blood capillary system goes all through the body, and it is surrounded by a muscular system. And this muscular system is affected with every heartbeat, because the heart is a muscle. So with every heartbeat, this muscular system is pumping all through the body. And you have a second heart. What's your second heart? Your second heart is your calf muscle. And the system that goes away from your heart is your arterial system, and the one that comes back is your venous system. So I was in a lecture with Dr. Jonathan Gibbs, and I was sitting halfway up the audience, and he could see people were getting tired, so he said, "Everyone up." He said, "Okay, Barbara." Picked me out. He said, "Show us how to stimulate the second heart." And I went. That's all I did. He laughed. He said, "The heart muscle, the heart muscle gets the blood away from the heart, but it is the calf muscle." So can you see when people are sitting down all day, the calf hardly gets a showing. And that's why if your work entails computer work, every hour you should run up and down stairs, jump down, do push-ups. Ideally, every office should have a rebounder. 1 minute every hour on that rebounder. Because that's, of course, what is strengthening causing your body to leap, is your calf muscle. There's another system, and it's called the lymphatic system. And it's also a network of capillaries. And your lymphatic system sweeps away waste from the tissues. Your lymphatic system doesn't have a pump. And your lymphatic system is not surrounded by muscles. And your lymphatic system has little gates. It's like a network of little canals. And they're one-way gates because they're sweeping away waste from the tissues. What stimulates the lymphatic system is really movement of arms and legs. But there's nothing that stimulates it better than the rebounder. So let me show you how the rebounder does it. Pardon? No. Have a look. So how does the rebounder do this? When you're jumping on the rebounder, and remember, if you're not used to it and your back or your whatever, it hurts, then you just start with this. And you might find that as you do that for a while, then you can start a little bit of jump. So when you're on the rebounder, when you leave the mat, and you get to the peak of your jump, every gate opens in your lymphatic system. And when you hit the mat, every gate closes. And when then you're up again, every gate opens. So it's open, shut, open, shut, open, shut. So it has like a pumping effect on your lymphatic system. Remember what your lymphatic system does? It sweeps away waste from the tissues. And if you remember back to our first lecture, that those microorganisms in our body, they evolve into a bacterial form to clean up waste. And one of the best things you can do to your body is come to evening shade retreat and do a cleanse. And get that waste out of the body so that your own cells don't have to change into a bacterial form to try and clean it up. All you need to do is 2 minutes in the morning on the rebounder that will stimulate your lymphatic system for the day. Because every time we move, scratch our head, walk over here, that is just maintaining your lymphatic system activity. There are 3 forces that come together to cause rebounding to be such an effective form of exercise, and that is you defying gravity, and that is the one way that we can strengthen our body is to defy gravity. The other force is acceleration. And when your feet leave the mat, you're accelerating up into the air. Then when you get to the peak, you experience deceleration. And then you start moving because of gravity back down to the mat, acceleration. You hit the mat, deceleration, acceleration, deceleration, the whole thing, the whole time. So these 3 forces have a dramatic effect on every single cell in the body. It's the only exercise that affects every single cell in the body, is the rebounding. And NASA found that rebounding or trampolining was the only activity that prepared the astronauts for outer space. Because what they were finding is their astronauts, who were very fit, when they came back from outer space, sometimes they'd lost 25% muscle strength and bone strength. Because in outer space, there's no gravity. And strength comes by defying gravity. But they found the one exercise that prepared them and got them their muscles even a little bit better toned in preparation and their bones better toned was the trampolining or rebounding. And then when they returned, they hadn't lost as much. And within 1 week only, they'd regained their full strength if they went straight back into rebounding or trampolining. A friend of mine told me, and she gets abused children. She has a big trampoline and she said it does so much for them. Does so much, because what it does, it gets their balance. It even gets balance in their thoughts. Just the rebounding, the jumping up and down. And if you've got a trampoline, where are the kids? They're out on the And if you've got a little trampoline in your home and kids visit, guess where they are? I've come to the conclusion that people start to get old because they stop jumping. What's the old saying? We should jump for joy.
If you just bounce but you don't get off the mat.
Well, the question is, if you just bounce, this is the health bounce. Obviously you're not getting as better effect than if you leap, but if this is all you can do at first, that's what you start with.
Do the gates open and close?
Do the gates open and close? They do a little bit, but the more you do, the better they are. And some people don't get on because of their balance. Well, your balance is set by your inner ears and by the bottom of your feet. So it's actually rebounding that will actually reset your balance. And some ladies don't get on because if they do, they lose a bit of urine. Well, that's a clear indication that that's the very muscle that's going to be strengthened. You just empty the bladder before you get on. And if at first, even if you empty your bladder, you feel a little come out, well, just start with this. You just start with this. Start with this. That's why you're the doctor. You're the doctor. One lady said, no, I can't rebound, hurts my back. Well, I found out she got on and she just started leaping straight away. Now you got to notice that when babies come out of us, they don't start walking. Little by little by little. That's how you do it, little by little. We're going to have a break now. And I think it is past, so we're going to just have a 10-minute break this morning, so that because we started a little late. So we're going to come back at 11 and look at water and salt. little, no, where are they? I'd go, "Goo!" and they'd all come running. So, Jacqueline, if you could just ask everyone to be quiet, I'll start.
Everyone be quiet, we're starting. No more whiskey.
Yes, once again, we're going to the cell. Because that's what we are. We're just a bunch of cells. We've got 100 trillion cells in the body. And 75 trillion are just like what I have drawn here. And 25 trillion are the red blood cells. And what I'm drawing for you here is little energy cycles. Now, when I draw the cell, I draw it as if there's one per cell, but there can be 200 energy cycles in one cell. Isn't that incredible? So you do the maths on that. If you're getting enough oxygen, 200 times 36 units of energy, how are you going to feel? You're going to be jumping out of your skin with energy. How nice. But what I want to talk about in this lecture specifically is water. So what type of water should we be drinking? The best water is rainwater. But I guess if you live in a city with a lot of smog and the water's coming on a rusty old roof, then it's an idea to filter your water. But what's more dangerous than a bit of rust in your water is actually fluoride. And as you saw when we looked at the gastrointestinal tract, this is a hollow tube. And anything that goes in that hollow tube is not part of you or me till it gets broken down and taken into the blood. So one of the worst is fluoride. And unfortunately, it's a byproduct from aluminium industry. And I don't know how they ever got away with putting it in water. They put it in to strengthen the teeth. All it does is strengthen the outer dentine. It does not strengthen the tooth. And yet it's very hard on the kidneys. It's very hard on the liver. So it's a good idea if you live in the city to have a water filter. I am not proficient in all water filters, but I do understand that the reverse osmosis is the best for getting the fluoride out. There are lighter filters that can get the chlorine out, but you can pour a glass of water that's got chlorine in it and you can put it on the bench for an hour and the chlorine will evaporate. So chlorine is a lot easier to get out of water, but the fluoride is not. So the best type of water is spring water, is rainwater. Some ask, what about distilled water? Well, there's a thought that we shouldn't drink distilled water because the minerals are taken out. Well, there's not many minerals in water. If there were a lot of minerals in water, it would taste like seawater because that's what seawater has. Seawater contains 92 minerals. And aren't you glad we don't have to drink seawater? It's not very nice. It's incredibly salty. It has 92 minerals in it. What about alkaline water? Yes, alkaline water is good, but please don't drink it with your meals because you don't want to alkalize your stomach. I personally don't think it's worth several $1,000s to buy the machine, but if you've got a spare couple of $1,000s, you know, it's not a bad investment. I'd rather spend that couple of $1,000 coming to the retreat for a week, yes? But as long as the water you're drinking is fluoride free, that's probably the most important. I always say to people, how much water do you drink? Some people say not enough. Some people say, I don't like drinking water, otherwise I'm rushing to the bathroom all day. Some people say, I don't drink water or my feet swell. Do you know what those last two answers tell me? The water is not getting inside the cell. Because that's where we need to get the water, is inside the cell. So how do we get the water inside the cell? To be able to understand how we get the water in the cell, we need to look at the 4 vitals. These are 4 vital elements needed for life. Whether you're an ant or whether you are an elephant or a plant or a human, number 1 vital element needed for life is oxygen. And that's no surprise, we've been looking at that. The second most vital element needed for life is water. The third is sodium, which is a surprise to many. And the fourth is potassium. I'd like to target the third for the moment. So the highest concentration of sodium is found in seawater. And of those 92 minerals, 30% is sodium and 50% is chloride. And because these are the 2 main minerals, man evaporates it, scoops the first minerals off, bleaches it white, puts aluminium with it, there's your table salt. So table salt has 2 minerals. And these are such harsh minerals, if you were to inject them into the blood of someone, you'd kill them. And 80% of that salt goes to industry. 20% goes to making into salt. And you know, they even have the hide to call it sea salt. Well, it came from the sea. But it's nothing like seawater. Because instead of 92 minerals, it's got 2. They're out of balance. And in Matthew chapter 5, verse 13, the Bible says, "Ye are the salt of the earth. If the salt has lost its savour, wherewith shall it be salted? It is henceforth good for nothing but to be cast out and trodden under foot of men." It's old English. How does the salt lose its savour? I'd like to suggest that this salt has lost its savour. It's lost the 90 minerals that are designed to buffer the harshness of sodium chloride. And I thought of that verse when I was in Minneapolis in the middle of winter and I saw salt being thrown on the road to melt the snow. And no wonder so many of their cars are rusty. And I thought of that verse. It is now good for nothing but to be cast out and trodden under foot of men. And if you were to take that salt, teaspoon to a cup of water and mix up a whole tank and put the fish from the sea into that solution, all the fish die. But you can get what's called whole salt. Celtic salt is a hand-harvested sea salt, harvested in the old Celtic method, and it contains 82 minerals. Baja salt is also a hand-harvested sea salt on the coast of Celtics from the coast of France, Brittany. The French government have declared 4 million acres heritage because they recognise the value of keeping this Celtic salt pure. And where the Baja salt is harvested, it is on a pristine section in Mexico. And what I have found as I travel, in every country, if you search it out, you will find a hand-harvested natural salt, the way it's traditionally been harvested. Celtic salt contains 3 magnesiums. And that's why it is so wet. And that's why a lot of people don't like it, because it's wet. But it's wet because it has 3 magnesiums, and magnesium is a water-hungry molecule. So when you have a lot of rain, you'll find your salt will get even wetter because the 3 magnesiums are pulling the moisture into it. So the 3 magnesiums are magnesium sulfate, that's Epsom salts, magnesium chloride, and magnesium bromide. So this explains the wetness of the salt. And this explains why when you put a crystal of Celtic salt on your tongue, if you're not used to Celtic salt, start with the size of a sesame seed. I probably have about 4 times that much, but I'm very much used to it. And a lot of people find that the food we're serving are a bit salty. Are you finding that? Okay, some are naughty, some are shaking. Because so many people have trained themselves into less salt, less salt, less salt. And I'll show you why there is a claim that salt is bad. I'll show you that in a minute, but I think I've already given you a bit of an idea. When you put a crystal of Celtic salt on your tongue, your mucous membranes, you chew it a bit, your mucous membranes are absorbing it. And the reason why I like to use that crystal is because the salt it's dried quite quickly, because on the coast of Brittany there are these big peninsulas, so they've got the salt flats like this. And because, as I'm sure we all know, there's a lot of breeze by the sea, that the seawater evaporates very quickly, and they hand harvest it and gather up those crystals and then seal it into containers, that a lot of the minerals are trapped in those crystals. So when you put the crystals in your mouth and you crunch them, then those gases are being released in your mouth, even iodine. In parts per million, very, very small, but you don't need a lot. Especially if you're having a little bit every time you have a glass of water, and put it on your potato and put it on your lentils. It's a nice maintenance dose. So when you put that crystal in your mouth, crunch it, and then have water, the magnesiums are absorbed by the mucous membranes, and then the water is pulled by the magnesium into the cell. It's the quickest way to hydrate a body, is that little bit of salt and then the water. Don't flood your system with water. We've seen what happens on the land when we have floods. How do you flood your system with water? 600 ounces all at once. That's a flood. You're far better to have it the way God usually sends rain, little by little. So this is what I do. When I wake up in the morning, I put a crystal in my mouth, crunch it, and then I have about a half a glass of water. Then I go to the bathroom, I have another half a glass of water. Then I pray and have another bit of salt and another half glass of water. Then I get dressed and I have another half glass of water. So can you see that by the time I go for my walk, I've already had at least 2, sometimes 3 doses of salt and 3 glasses of water. Because I don't want to carry water on my walk. It's a pain. I like to have my arms free so I can do my arm exercises. That's the easiest way to do it. I never used to drink water. I never used to drink water because I just couldn't drink a whole glass at once. And then when I started to study water and the importance on the body, I thought, I'll just take it in by little bits. And that's how I can do it. And so this is my water bottle, and I think it's similar to yours. I like the straw because I can drink a lot. And I think that that's 16 ounce. Well, I measured it this morning, and I think it's 18 ounce. A little bit more. So there's a rule that I have with my body. I have to drink at least 1.5 those before I can eat my breakfast. Good to have rules with your body. I bring under my body, I keep it into subjection. Got that? Now, if I wake up at 6:30 and breakfast is 7, I'll just drink that. But I won't drink it all at once. I'll have a few mouthfuls, I'll get dressed, I'll have a few more mouthfuls, but I'll drink all of that over about 5 minutes. That's if I've slept in. And sometimes that only really happens if I don't get to bed till late. We had a flight that didn't get into Pittsburgh until I think it was 8 o'clock. And then we had a 2-hour drive, and there was lightning, and they didn't unload the banks for another hour. But God is so good, because when the bags finally came through, there were 4 bags. Jacqueline's and mine. We said, thank you, Father in heaven. Took our bags and everyone's going. And then we had a 2-hour drive in the pouring rain. And then we finally got to our little Airbnb at midnight. See, that's quite rare for me to get so late. And then we slept till 7 a.m. Big sleep in for me. Got 7 hours that night. You know, it's not the odd day, it might be 6 or 7, as long as most of your nights 7. And then there was only half an hour till breakfast. And so that's the day that I just drank 2 cups, and I drank it over 5 minutes. But most of the time, it's just little by little by little. That's the best way to take it in the body. Lining our gastrointestinal tract, a villi. We've looked at this a few times. On the villi, there's a receptor site, and there's a carrier in that receptor site, and the carrier is designed to take the glucose through to the blood. But that carrier says, I will not accept you, glucose, unless you come with a molecule of sodium. When the sodium's present, then the carrier will take them through to the blood. Now you see that piece of information. I just read that in my anatomy and physiology book. All the information is in there. So I memorized exactly the sentence it says from the big anatomy and physiology book that the nurses, doctors use. And this is what it said. Sodium is the main transport system of glucose across the brush border wall and into the blood. And what are so many people told? Don't eat salt. Salt is bad for you. It's hard in your arteries. That is true of this salt, but there's salt and there's salt. And that's why the Bible says if the salt has lost its savour, I'd like to suggest that this salt has lost its savour. It's lost all of those minerals. And if you taste the difference between Celtic salt and table salt, you'll taste that that table salt has lost its savour. This is a delicious salt, whereas this is a very harsh salt. And this salt is so harsh, it kills the taste buds. Have you noticed that some people will sit to eat the meal and they'll shake salt all over it and they haven't even tasted it yet? Well, have mercy on them. Their taste buds are dying. But something also a little bit more dangerous happens. In the membrane around the cell are sodium-potassium pumps, and the highest concentration of mineral inside the cell is potassium, and the highest concentration of mineral outside the cell is sodium. And those sodium-potassium pumps, they're constantly going like that. They're basically going in and out like that, maintaining the correct balance. Our body runs according to precision balance. But if someone is pouring table salt on everything and everything they eat is high in sodium, sodium levels are going too high. In fact, deep fried foods. So the batters on fish, the deep fried foods, they put so much salt in there that they put sugar in there to balance out the sodium sugar and make it more, it stimulates the taste buds, so people are wanting more and more and more. Where's potassium found? Potassium found is in abundance in all your fresh fruits and vegetables. So when you're eating fresh fruits and vegetables in abundance, you will have a nice amount of potassium. And by the way, cayenne pepper has potassium. So if someone's eating a lot of fast food, they're putting salt on everything, sodium levels are going up, they're not eating any fresh fruits and vegetables, potassium levels are dropping, osmosis and diffusion happens when the highest concentration merges into the lowest concentration. So sodium, which is usually in the cell in a very small amount, becomes a large amount, and that causes the cell to swell. That's called high blood pressure. The doctor's right. is that that table salt can increase blood pressure. But Dr. Jacques de Langry, he's passed now, but he wrote a book called Sea Salt's Hidden Power. And if he gets anyone who has high blood pressure, a patient with high blood pressure, he puts them on Celtic salt. Because what Celtic salt does is it restores the balance to in and out of the cell. And if someone goes on a no-salt diet, so their sodium levels go so low that there's not even salt inside the cell, that cell can even explode. So it's back again to balance. And what an incredible body we have. God has put all these systems in place to help maintain the balance. It's like the kidneys I showed you yesterday, I think it was yesterday, how the balance is maintained in the little tubules. Same, this balance here, but we just need to be eating food the way God made it. Making sure every meal we have, if it's breakfast, we usually do the fruits at breakfast and have the vegetables at lunch. And that maintains the balance. Calcium, it can't get into the cell by itself. What does calcium need to get into the cell, students? It needs vitamin D. And when vitamin D gets into the cell, under the action of, when vitamin D pulls the calcium into the cell, it also pulls all the other minerals into the cell. Glucose can't get into the cell by itself. It needs insulin. And when insulin is present, then the glucose can get into the cell. Remember, this is the CBD, the central business district of the human body. But let me give you a scenario, sadly too common today. Many people are dehydrated. One pathologist said, we did studies on caffeine. It takes 5 glasses of water to make up for the dehydrating agents in 1 cup of coffee. And when you consider that piece of information alone, most people are dehydrated. No wonder their brains aren't working well. So let's have a look at a scenario. Someone's not drinking enough water. They're not having any greens. That's where you get a lot of magnesium in your greens. They're just taking their table salt, so the water can't get into the cell. They're trying to keep out of the sun because they don't want to get skin cancer. So they're vitamin D deficient, so the calcium and the minerals cannot get into the cell. You know what I was reading yesterday? I was reading how important vitamin D is for the release of serotonin in the gut. And remember, serotonin is your mood hormone. It's all intertwined. And let's say they're on a high carbohydrate diet trying to lose weight. They've eliminated the fat because they're trying to lose weight. How many people do that? And because they're not having the satiation that fat gives, they're eating all day long. And what are they eating all day long? Carbs that don't actually satisfy. And so what happens is the cell membrane develops insulin resistance. Basically, the cell says, we're sick of the sight of you. So it develops insulin resistance. Can you see what's happening now? The water can't get in, the minerals can't get in, the glucose can't get in, and the body says, we've got a bit of a crisis here. So we'll just force it into the cell. What's that called? High blood pressure. High blood pressure can be the result of dehydration. It can be the result of mineral deficiency. It can be the result of vitamin D deficiency. It can be the result of a high carbohydrate diet. And so one of the policemen said to me, I had to listen carefully, his accent's so strong. He told me he didn't have an accent, I had the accent. He said, I'm on 2 blood pressure medications. What can I do? Isn't it lovely the way God works? That those policemen heard these messages. He said, it says on Facebook you've got a tablet. I said, no, it's not me. Cayenne pepper, start drinking more water. Yeah, I'll try. So when someone has high blood pressure, we've got to sit and put the detective hat on, because you can see it can be a few things. And it's not just the salt. I have a lot of salt. And so when I was in Dubai, I had a sore tooth, so I went to have it looked at, and I had to have my blood pressure taken. And my blood pressure was, I'm trying to think what it was, I think it was 70. I'm trying to think. No, it wasn't. Yeah, it was 70. It was 70 over 55. And they said, "That's very low." I said, "Doesn't bother me." Did you hear that? Doesn't bother me. You know, we had a lady, and I had a lot of salt, and the nurse went, "Okay." And we had a lady in Living Springs one year, and the staff said to me, "Barbara, her blood pressure is 190 on 95. And she was about 45, Mexican lady, magnificent long black hair, active. I said, "Your blood pressure, it's 190 on 95. She said, "Oh, it's always that, don't bother me." I said, "Okay, but don't bother you, don't bother me." You know, we get locked into these labels, isn't that true? Now, if I'm passing out all day, maybe my blood pressure's a bit low, but I'm not passing out all day, have you noticed? Must be. I never take it. I don't know when the last time I took it was. Doesn't bother me. I believe your body will tell you if there's a problem. And it does, is that right? And that's why a lady came to me last night. She said, "Barbara," she's crying. She's looked like she's 38. She said, "I've just been told that my fallopian tubes are all blocked up." I said, "Oh, I don't believe that." Did you hear what the first thing I said was? Mm-hmm. She looked at me like this. I said, "Oh, I don't believe that." She said, "Really?" I said, yeah, they can get it wrong. What difference is it going to make if, in fact, it's going to make a worse difference if you really think it is and you're picturing them blocked? I said, "Get the yam cream, balance the hormones, and put the castor oil compresses on." Her tears stopped and she smiled and she went away. That took me 30 seconds to say that. Put not your trust in princes. Sometimes they get it wrong. And that's what you have to have in the back of your mind. Sometimes they get it wrong. The Bible says, "Put not your trust in princes, neither in the Son of Man, in whom there is no help. His breath goes forth, he returns unto his earth. In that very day his thoughts perish." In other words, what is he? He's just a man. He's just a person. And sometimes they get it wrong. That's what you have to remember. Remember, we've only been given one title. 1 John chapter 3, verse 1, "Behold, what manner of love the Father has given unto us, that we should be called the sons, the daughters of God." That's our only title. So be careful you don't take on the title that you've been given, because what happens a lot of the time, someone's given a title and they go, "Oh, righto," and now they believe it and they live that title. But you know, they can get it wrong. Blood tests are not always correct. You have to remember that. So yes, we need water. So how much, but we also need salt. So how much water do we need a day? This I also got from the Anatomy and Physiology book. The water loss in a day from the kidneys. Now I think you realise that a litre is a quart, yeah? That's 4 glasses. So kidneys in a day, litre loss, or let's be American here and say quart loss. It's the same thing. So quart loss in a day from your kidneys is 0.5. Sorry, 1.5. So from the kidneys, 1.5 quart loss. From the colon, it's 0.3. From the skin, it's 0.5. And for you at the moment, it would probably be about 0.7 or 8 because of the steam saunas. You're perspiring a lot more. And from the lungs, believe it or not, you lose some with every breath, is 0.2. Now that equals 2.5 quart loss in a 24-hour period. So we need to replace at least 2. That's 8 glasses a day. The other half are coming in through those wonderful strawberries and pear cream and grapes we had this morning. So the other half, the other 2 glasses can come in through your fresh fruits and vegetables, maybe herb teas. So we need to replace that, and you just got to find out how to get it in. Start early. You're going to bed with the water next to your bed. As soon as you wake up, start as soon as you wake up. So when I go to bed, I have my salt and I have my water next to my bed. So here's a good rule of thumb. So 50 pound to 1 quart. So 100 pound, 2 quarts. If you're 200 pound, that can be a little scary how much you have to have. You just increase it and do what you can. There's a book in our library. It's called One of the Body's Many Cries for Water. And it was written by Dr. Batman Gehaldi, an Iranian doctor. And this Iranian doctor was a political prisoner. And because he was a doctor, everyone came to him. All the prisoners came to him whenever they were sick. And he didn't have anything. So what he'd do is he'd give them a glass of water. 15 minutes later, he'd give them another glass of water. 15 minutes later, he'd give them another glass of water. That's all he had. But all of their problems started to resolve. Scratching his head. And all the prisoners are saying, we've got this fantastic doctor. He's fixing us. And all he's doing, that was his treatment protocol, a glass of water every 15 minutes. People on the floor, groaning with stomach pain, with all their medications beside them, within half an hour were not groaning anymore. What he found was that it's the stomach. That lining the stomach is a thick mucosal wall, and when we're dehydrated, we lose that thick mucosal wall, and then it's very easy for the stomach acid to start eating away at the lining of the stomach. Drinking a glass of water half an hour before the meal, the first thing it does is replace that. But when we're dehydrated, that's one of the first things that we lose. So we'll call him Dr. B, he started documenting what he was finding. And it wasn't long after that the politics were changed and he was freed. And he said, do you mind if I stay a bit longer? I'm right in the middle of this interesting research. He started to present his findings at medical conferences. He started writing in medical journals. Unfortunately, it wasn't a very popular message. And he wrote the book, One of the Body's Many Cries for Water. It's got 2 other titles. He's Not Sick, He's Thirsty. And the other title is Don't Treat Thirst with Medications. So one of the best things you can do, no matter what the problem, give the person a glass of water. Remember Dr. B. So I want to tell you about a man that came to our retreat. It's a few years ago now. He did not want to be at our retreat. His wife had paid the full amount, so he had to come. And every question I asked, it was just, yes, no, no, yes. How much water did you drink? 2 liters. So I left it because he was not very happy even about being questioned. I said, do you want any medication? He said, I'm on a different medication every month, a different antibiotic every month to kill Helicobacter pylori that is causing me stomach pain. I said, how long have you been on this regime? He said, 5 months. So that's 5 courses of antibiotics, or he's on his 5th, and the Helicobacter's still there. And what's the definition of insanity? I'd like to suggest it's not working. I'm not criticising him. I think he and his doctor are hoping that the next antibiotic will do it. I said, are you interested in coming off your medication? He said, no, thank you very much. I'm very happy with my medication. Now, God made us free moral agents. Isn't that true? So I respect everyone's choice, no matter what they choose. It's not my choice, but if they choose that. And if someone chooses to be vaccinated, I respect their choice. It's their right. And please give me that respect if I choose not to. Isn't it funny how it doesn't usually go 2 ways? Doesn't matter how I'm treated, I will only ever treat people with great respect. At the end of the first lecture, where I talked about the true cause of disease and the true role of microorganisms in disease, his wife and he came up to me. They said, that made more sense than anything we've heard for a long time. We'd like your advice. What would you do? I said, well, if I was you, I would stop the antibiotics. They're obviously not working. And I will give you some slippery elm. Slippery elm coats, soothes and heals the lining of the gut. He said, righto, we'll go with that. End of the week, I had a very happy man sitting in front of me. He said, I've had no stomach pain for 2 days. This stomach pain I've had for 25 years. The man was early 50s. I said, wow, that's good news. But what he said next made me more excited. He said, I've worked out the problem. I believe this is the mirror. We're the doctor. And you probably have found that light bulbs go off at different times. Is that right? And remember, I mentioned it last night, that the Holy Spirit is our teacher. And I really believe that God convicts us in different areas. And if you found that that conviction that you get you couldn't take from any man, but the conviction comes to your heart, I'm going to do it. He said, I've worked out the problem. I said, what is the problem? He said, I was drinking 1 litre of water with every meal. Remember, he said he drinks 2 litres of water a day, so I thought, righto, he's sort of not happy about any questions I ask. I'll just leave that with him. Between meals, he was dehydrated. And because the stomach acid was damaging the line of his stomach, remember, we're going back to Monday's lecture, his own microorganisms changed roles and became the cleanup team. It's called bacteria. So Helicobacter pylori is coming along and starting to clean up the waste from the damage from the hydrochloric acid, because he hasn't got that thick mucosa lining, because between meals he's dehydrated. And what was happening was, when we smell, think, see food, hydrochloric acid's released. And hydrochloric acid, remember, it's antimicrobial, antibacterial, and it's just about to come down and wipe these guys out. And what does he do? Within 5 minutes of starting to eat, there's a big glass of water. What does that do to hydrochloric acid? Just dilutes it. And so, at Misty Mountain Health Retreat, he learnt the importance of drinking between meals. He learnt the importance of having a glass of water half an hour before the meal, and that automatically built up the lining of his stomach. And then, not drinking with meals, he said, it's been a bit hard. He said, I keep going for the glass. And then hydrochloric acid's released. Hydrochloric acid comes down, wipe out, wipe out, wipe out. His body healed itself. Everything we need, we've got. We just need to know how to look after it. We need to know what to do to it so that it functions well. Proverbs 14 verse 6, the Bible says, a scorner seeketh wisdom and finds it not, but knowledge is easy to him that understands. When you understand how the stomach works, when you understand how water affects the body, you begin to understand what our body needs, what to do and how to do it. God gave us a brain that thinks. And so appealing to our reasoning powers that's how God works with us. Let's come down the gastrointestinal tract and we come to the pancreas. Pancreas is a very interesting organ because it releases 2 hormones into the blood. So these are the hormones released into the blood, insulin and glucagon. Insulin and glucagon are the 2 hormones that balance blood glucose levels. Because I've never beaten up my pancreas, it works very well. And so this morning, right now, my stomach's digesting the meal. And as the glucose is released into the blood, the insulin gets it into the blood, into the cell. And I would like to suggest that maybe about 1 o'clock today, I'll be starting to get a little bit hungry. And so my glucagon will be released. And that actually helps to maintain the blood sugar levels because my pancreas is working well. When the pancreas has been beaten up, then you haven't got that working well. And because I'm well hydrated, those hormones are released just at the right time when they should be. But into the gut, the pancreas releases enzymes. In fact, we'll just say 5 enzymes. And we looked at this when we did our journey through the gut. It releases enzymes to finalize starch digestion, to finalize fat digestion, and 2, remember the trypsin brothers, to finalize protein digestion, and also the sodium bicarbonate to neutralize it. All of those require water. So when we're dehydrated, that can affect our body being able to balance blood glucose levels. And if we're not drinking enough water, then we don't get the enzyme release from the pancreas to be able to finalize digestion. Coming into the further down, we come to the colon. And one of the main functions of the colon is to take water out so stools are formed. If a person is dehydrated, more water gets taken out than should be taken out. And then you're left with rabbit pellets and cement. Every single part of digestion requires water. Now let's go further into the body and have a look at the joints. I can open and close my hands without any pain because around every joint there is fluid, and that fluid is 99% water. It's synovial fluid. If I'm dehydrated, then I'm not going to have as much water there, so that's a contributing factor to arthritis. And how many little old ladies have arthritis? And how many little old ladies don't drink enough water and drink cups of tea all day long? 75% of upper body weight is held in your lower back by water. So back pain can be caused because of dehydration. Not the only cause of back pain, but it is certainly a contributing factor. So I'm going to give you a story to illustrate. Michael's got a friend, his name's Jerry, and he's a bricklayer. And Michael was talking to him, this is about 2 years ago, and he said to Michael, "Oh, all my mates and I, we got the most terrible lower back pains. And they're all on the job site, bricklayers." And Michael said, "How much water do you drink?" He said, "Nah, we drink Coke." Michael said, "Don't you drink any water?" Nah, it's a hot day and the cold Coke's so much nicer." He said, "You're all drinking Coke?" Yep. On the way to work, we just buy big bottles." Michael said, "Well, I've got a challenge for you. Stop the Coke and drink the water." And Jerry said, as if that would make any difference. So Michael said, "Prove me wrong." And Jerry said, I will. So the next day he said to all the blokes on the job site, okay, look guys, I want your cooperation here. I've got this mate who reckons that if we drink water we won't get back pain. And they all went, oh, as if. And he said, I want to prove him wrong. So I've got a challenge. For the next 5 days, we just drink water on the job site. Anyway, there was a bit of grumbling and complaining, but they agreed. After 5 days, Jerry rang up Michael and said, I hate to tell you this, but you're right. He says, 5 days now, and none of us have got back pain. You see, 75% of upper body weight is held in your lower back by water. The other percentage is held by ligaments and muscles and tendons, but mostly water. And the only water that goes into our body is the water we put into our body. Have you noticed there's no reserve tank on the back? The only water that goes in is the water that we put in. So little by little. One lady said, well, I like soda and I like cups of tea and there's water in there. I said, well, how clean would your body be if you washed it in tea or coffee or soda? Has to be water and water alone. And sugar is a major dehydrating agent, and caffeine also is a major dehydrating agent. So sorry, they do not hydrate the body. So it's leaving breaks again between meals so that you've got time to drink, and also that little bit of Celtic salt. You might have noticed last Sunday how Jacqueline and I rushed to the lunch because we worked out we hadn't eaten for 8 hours. We had an early breakfast, but we knew there was going to be a really good lunch here, and so we drank a lot of water that day. We drank a lot of water, and what you'll find too is that little bit of salt on the water, it helps to balance blood glucose levels between meals. And remember, if the food is 8 hours instead of 5, then you've got glycogen stores. Then you've got fat stores, so you're not going to fall over and die when you don't eat. But also remember that our bodies are creatures of habit, and they love doing the same things at the same time every day. And I discovered that very early in my role as mother, that the children were happy doing the same things at the same time every day. So at home, I wake at 5, I walk at 6, and I eat at 7. So here I'm eating at 8:15. And the first couple of days there was a bit of a protest down there, and I said, settle down, you'll get used to it. And it has. I'm so glad that we live in a body that can adapt and adjust. But what the body does not like is 6 o'clock one morning, 10 o'clock the next morning, 8 o'clock the next morning. It does not like that. So when I'm in Fiji, breakfast is always 9 a.m. and the main meal is 3 p.m. The first day there's a little bit of a protest down here, but it gets used to it. So you see what I mean? And within 24 hours I'm used to that. So the body certainly can do that, but all over the place, it doesn't like that. It likes you to keep to routine. My time is up. Tomorrow we're going to have a look at the brain. All week we've been looking at the body, and tomorrow I'm going to go into detail in the brain. So thank you for your attention. I think there are a few activities happening now, and here comes Christina to tell us all about them. Thank you.
We're very blessed that Barbara came to the little town of Sleepy Hollow. While you're all here, I did hear a funny story last night from one of the guests at the gym. She told me they were sitting on the back row, and she was sitting next to this elderly lady, and it hadn't started yet. And the lady looked at the guest and said, you know, this is a televised event. Barbara really isn't here. And you were back at the table signing books. and the guest says, well, she is here. She just signed my book.